All right. Let's go to the Lord in prayer, ask him to watch over all this technology. Oh, Father, we do thank you that we can meet together. We thank you that we can share in your life. Just thank you, Lord, for what you're doing through each one of us. And we want to just keep hearing you and doing your work the way you want it done. Please give our brother Marcel your peace, your wisdom, your direction. We're here just to celebrate the work he's doing, and we just pray that we might learn from you, Father, as we talk and think and reflect upon these matters that Marcel has brought forward to us in this dissertation. We just pray all these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, let me just kind of go over the agenda. We'll spend some time having Marcel give us a presentation, PowerPoint presentation. While he's doing that, you might be thinking of thoughts, questions, topics that you'd like to bring forth in the discussion time. We'll then have a little bit of a discussion time. After that, we will then move into a time of evaluation. I'll need to take you, Marcel, out of the session for about 10 minutes while the three of us who are on your oral review committee fill out an evaluation form. Then we'll come back and share those results with everyone. And I do want to mention one issue that I think is always important. I'm going to share my screen for a moment. Let's see. All right. It's important, the top of this form that we're going to fill out, it kind of talks about the goals of an oral review, and I'm finding it helpful just to make sure that we go over these 3 points when I start oral reviews. The goal of this oral review is, number one, to provide the student, you, Marcel, with the opportunity to make a presentation that summarizes the highlights of the final project. Number two, it also provides a final consultation time where the student, you, Marcel, can interact with practitioners, research experts, and your personal learning community on the topics. And then finally, we want to just celebrate the fact that you're going to graduate. And we don't really want surprises at an oral review that somehow you're going to find out you don't graduate. That's really not the case. What we want to do, though, is we want to be helpful, and we want to provide, if there's any thoughts that we think would be helpful to add to the dissertation, then we would bring those out in the evaluation time. But at this point, any of the really critical issues should have been handled by the time that we get to this point in the whole dissertation process. So I just want to kind of relieve your mind, okay? You're not up before the judge and jury to decide whether you graduate or not. It's just a time when we are going to think together and think about what you've done and anything else that we think might be helpful as you're completing this dissertation. All right, with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Marcel, why don't you go ahead and share your screen, if you can. And if you want to be able to bring up that PowerPoint, or I can bring it up on my screen, whichever way you'd like. Oh, there you go. That way you can change the slides when you're ready and lead us through that PowerPoint. So go ahead and take the microphone, Marcel. Oh, I'm sorry. Your mic is muted. Let's unmute your mic. There's a little button on the bottom left, I think, of your screen. You should be able to click that little microphone and it will turn on your microphone. Actually, I can turn it on from here too if that button isn't right there handy. Let me just see. Yeah, I'm going to unmute you, I think. Let's see if that works. Oh, well, there we go. Now you should be on.
Thank you, Dr. Payne. Good afternoon. Well, I don't know what time it is. I think it's in Guyana. It's 6 p.m.
Right.
And I just want to say from the beginning, I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with you, Dr. Payne, and Dr. McCabe, and Dr. Thompson. All right. So the theme is, or the topic is, a collaborative approach for improved literacy performance of students at Smith's Primary School in Georgetown, Guyana. And I would like to begin the presentation by reflecting on the words of Margaret Mead, who said or postulated that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And this quotation from Margaret Mead, who's an American anthropologist, has really moved me, because I'm thinking, she said a small group of people, and I'm thinking with all the information gathered from back university, I'm thinking, what about if we had a large group of people who are committed and dedicated to transformation? I think we will really see real change in the world. So I thought I would begin with that quote. The problem, literacy deficiencies existed at Smith's Primary School in Georgetown, and this deficiencies that we saw in our children, it presented a real problem. And I'm just going to bring up a table here that shows you what would have been happening over a period of time. From 2015 to 2016, 2017, if we look at the number of children that were attaining the standards, literacy standards, look at those percentages at this particular school: 6.8, 3.3, 2.3, through 2015 to 2016. Now, the problem with this is that if in this particular school, our children have not been performing, it puts them back and presents a challenge for them going forward. And as you can see, the quotation here mentioned by Brian Frog, who talked about failure to obtain those necessary skills in the early grades, how it undermines a child's ability to succeed. And not only Born Fraud looked at this, but also supportive information came from one who talked about children will never go ahead to go on to access secondary education, more so tertiary education. So it is very important that at the foundational level, we have our children being able to, our children being literate. I think one writer says from grades 1 to 3, you learn to read, and after then you read to learn. And so obviously, if you have not learned to read, you can't read to learn. And therefore, that puts the child or children at a great disadvantage if they remain illiterate. Now, the context of the project and the adaptation to its context. Clearly, as I examined and looked at the school carefully, gaps existed in the teaching of literacy at that level. That's the grade 2 level. And the gaps existed basically because there was a piecemeal kind of approach to the teaching of literacy. And so also in these gaps, bound to these gaps would have been our stakeholders not being proficient, not being efficient with the skills necessary to address the problem from a holistic perspective. So persons were attempting to do their little thing in a corner rather than working as a team. Now, the students enrolled at this school in particular, they're drawn from the southern part of the city, which is generally referred to as the poorest part of the city. So here again, it is saying to me that we need to pay particular attention to how our children, they're being taught and to meet their needs. So how the project was adapted to suit the cultural context. It was adapted to suit the cultural context in the following ways. One, to cultivate a culture of collaboration for stakeholders in the teaching of literacy. So we needed to bring stakeholders together, and so that they could collaborate, they could work as a team in order to be effective. The second thing is to build capacity among stakeholders through training to effectively deliver the literacy program. So, and later on in our discussion, we'll see that our stakeholders, they lacked certain skills, abilities, and so they really needed to be trained in order for them to be effective. And when we talk about stakeholders, I'm referring to the principal of the school, I'm referring to the teachers of the school, the supervising officer, the education supervising officer also. Those persons they exhibited some deficiencies in terms of addressing the problem. And then also, as part of the context, the idea was to help stakeholders develop an appreciation for the poor and powerless, and that to recognize that our children, they have value in the sight of God. And I know Dr. Brian will be happy with this statement, because when I did his course, Poverty, Diversity, and Social Justice, this particular statement never left my mind by Rock and Van Dyke, when they talked about when it comes to grace, geography matters, and the good news is meant to reach and preach in hard places. And so people, because of the circumstances that might be mitigating against them or working against them, does not mean that we should abandon them and leave them alone. So when it comes to grace, geography matters, we should meet people and our children at every point of their need, regardless of their status quo. The project Embrace, if we're looking at I want us to look now at the theoretical framework and its essential components. The project Embrace the functionalism, the tenets of functionalism. And functionalism is a sociological term which views the school as a system where different in the school setting, they work hand in hand for the advancement of the school, the advancement of the cause of the children. So functionalism was one of the aspects that was dealt with, as I mentioned earlier. The concept of functionalism really speaks to collaboration, and I thought I should have put this little quote to just emphasize what it means to collaborate. And the Latins come and elaborate, meaning work together, simply working together. And this was taken from Sipe and Frick. So basically, the premise, therefore, was that the education officer, the principal, teachers, parents, the caregivers, once there is a working together and an understanding of their rules, I believe that transformation will have been forthcoming in the literacy performance of our students, and we will see that a little later. The theoretical framework also incorporated the principles of shalom and servant leadership in the process of transformation. And I think these two perspectives, they were so critical in terms of getting our children, the stakeholders, to life and to things differently, not being selfish, and to recognize that they all have a role to play sight of God in terms of empowering our children. The sources that were helpful to this project, of course, they were numerous, that I found to be very helpful. I used books, reports, periodicals or journals, course outlines. Some of these outlines were taken from Baki, PowerPoint presentations, research papers from international organizations, and so forth. Now, these sources, they covered an array of areas which range from leadership, which included leadership, theology, sociology, education and learning, behavioral psychology, to name a few. So these were some of the broader sources. And some examples of topics that these sources covered had to do with servant and shalom leadership, the power of unity, functionalism, the value of professional development in literacy, and so on. These sources included some of those. Now, sources that were specific, because this is part of the 12-point plan in terms of responding to the questions, sources that were specific to the culture in which the project was implemented included government documents, reports and local research papers. And topics covered would have included statistics in literacy performance of students, transforming education in Guyana, the mission of the Ministry of Education, the impact of poverty on the city. So those were some of the sources that were specific to my context. And if I could quickly go to the main theological principles, I found this Dr. Payne, Dr. McCaig, and Dr. Thomas. I found this very, very interesting. When I came to when you look at the concept of literacy, who would have believed that in the Bible, it is clearly spelled out the importance of that, and it brought me back to Solomon's view that there is nothing new under the sun, because as educators, sometimes we get a feeling that we've invented things and we're so good at what we do, but what is now was there before. And so the theological principles related to this project, basically they were God values education and literacy, the power of unity, God's delight in genuine service and prosperity, justice and morality as key components of shalom. So those were some of the theological principles related to the project, and I'll get a little deeper. In terms of God's value of education and literacy, it was interesting when I read the book of Daniel. Daniel spoke clearly to this issue where it is said, to these four young men, God gave knowledge and understanding in all kinds of literature and learning. And even as you look at that, you begin to understand why Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, why those gentlemen, they were so effective, because they were literate, they understand the culture of the Chaldeans, and so they were able to be very functional and effective doing the will of God in a foreign land. The whole idea of power of unity, and the Apostle Paul spoke to this in Ephesians when he talks about, from him the whole body is joined and held together by every supporting ligament, and grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. And I'm thinking about in the school system, if the parents, if the teachers, the principal, the education officer, if they understand that each one of them, each joint must supply, and if these joints supply, the impact that they will have in the process of transformation. And Bucknell was very clear when he said no part is to be neglected. Each is valuable and important to reaching the final goal. So we need to focus on our duties and our roles, responsibilities in a holistic fashion if we are going to really succeed in transformation. The next theological principle is God's delight in genuine service. And I saw this credence is found in the scripture reference, do nothing out of selfish ambition or in conceit. In humility, value others above yourselves. And I'm thinking, if as a teacher, if as an education officer, if as a parent, if you value the child or children God has given to us, I think we will give it our best shot to ensure that they fulfill potential, and it is something that will be pleasing in the sight of God. And I think some of these principles really hit home at some of our when we had our training seminar that really impacted the lives of the stakeholders. Prosperity, justice, morality is key components of shalom. That's another theological principle that came out, Genesis 37:14. It talks about Joseph, where Joseph is asked by Jacob to check on the shalom of his brothers and the cattle. So we see here a concern of Jacob, a concern of Jacob for the welfare of his sons, signifying they ought to be cared for with diligence for their own well-being. So our children ought to be cared for. And that's how we need to see those children that God has given to us charge over. Reference also, I really enjoy reading this book with Yoda, who wrote this book, Shalom. So reference is also made of shalom as a state of well-being, all rightness, okayness, and in rosy terms, I like this depicted a changed material state. So when we think about shalom, we think about fixing brokenness. We think about changing people's material state, and these things, they're not magical. It require intentional behavior if we're going to impact the school system. And I think many times, even as I look in my own context, you do not see that intentional behavior by all the stakeholders. And so sometimes our children do not do very well. The whole idea of justice, this point was attested to by the assertion of shalom is linked to social relationships. And I reflect on Solomon. Look how Israel prospered and developed because Solomon built relationships. And I'm thinking that if our stakeholders decided to build relationships among themselves, if they leverage resources from within and without, I could see them really making the change that we need to see concerning every child. And then there is the other theological principle is that of morality. And this speaks about values, honesty, people being fair with one another, possessing character. And the psalmist spoke decisively to this issue in Psalms 37:37. If I could go now to the research design, I incorporated in this research a mixed method. So the mixed method approach was used as advocated by Miriam and Tisdale. So that method was employed. I think this approach was important for me because it provided a better understanding of the problem, and it really set the platform for the intervention to follow. It allowed also for triangulation and cross-validation, corroboration of findings, because it's not only qualitative, but you were able to match the outcomes with statistics, which proved effective in my view. So the mixed method was critical to this process. For example, in this method, I used the questionnaires. Questionnaires were used to determine the knowledge base of, or the level of the impact our teachers would have been making on the performance of our students. Questionnaires were also used to determine the involvement of parents, how involved they were in affecting the performance of their children. So questionnaires were used for parents as well as teachers. When it came to the principal and the education officer, an interview was conducted because I wanted to get a sense from them as to how they felt and what their needs might have been in terms of helping them. And so the interview, I think, was very productive, and they were very, very clear and straightforward as to how they think that they were performing. And then the performance of students in literacy was interpreted by comparing the literacy performance of the students in the pre-test. I did a pre-test with them, and I'll speak some more about that later. And then the post-test by way of the t-test after administering the intervention plan on the stakeholders. Summary of the results phase. Responses proffered by teachers indicated that they were inexperienced and they had poor expectation of the students, which was not helpful. And I've learned as an educator that if we believe our children can't perform, that is exactly what will happen, and we will never go the extra mile to make them perform. So, good teachers really inspire children to learn, even if they may not be so inclined. They could be inspired when they come or they meet good teachers, ideal teachers. Response from parents or caregivers. Here again, their involvement or assistance given to children at home regarding it was marginal. And they said that some of them claimed that they did not even know what to do. And so they could not really make any impact on the lives of those children because they simply did not know. They admitted that they were not visiting the school, they were not paying much attention to literacy performance of the children. They wanted help, but they did not know how. Many of them said, so sir, we need to help our children, but how do we help our children? We don't have the capacity. And here is where I think the whole notion of extending a helping hand was critical by way of the intervention plan. So separate interviews asking the same questions were conducted with the education officer and the principal of the school. Of course, I need to give the principal and the education officer some credit because they claim that they were engaging in clinical supervision, which is a supervision on a one-to-one basis. It is designed to coach, to build up and so on. But they had no, it was done in an isolated fashion once in a far off. So they were not being very effective, but at least they were attempting to do something to help our children. Little support was provided by the principal and the supervising officer who, in terms of implementing the literacy programs of the school. And this view was evident because they had no clear strategic action to address teachers in the need, except to say that they encourage teachers. And so it goes beyond just encouragement. You have to have some kind of skill, some kind of ability, and even if you don't have that, you could be empowered to do so. And so we had those kinds of conversations. Normally in a school setting, and Brian, Dr. McCabe will, and as well as Dr. Thompson, all three of you, goodly gentlemen, you've been exposed to teaching, and you will know that as the head of the school system, you have to function as an instructional leader. It goes beyond just giving out tasks and so on. Sometimes you lead from the front by instruction, and the principal as well as the supervising officer claimed that they were far removed from that process of being an instructional leader. So here we see the shortcomings again. Now, they were asked questions that had to do with tracking and monitoring the performance of students in literacy, and this were really done. As a matter of fact, the principal interpreted tracking to me knowing what the results were. But it had to go beyond that. The supervising officer of the school found he did not find the time, according to him, to really track and to help the children in terms of using data. So both the principal and the supervising officer admitted that they needed exposure, which I think was very good of them and honest. You know, they like myself, if you don't know, you ask. So they needed to expose, they said that they needed exposure to professional development to perform better in literacy. And part of the summary of the results phrase, we will see that the mean score of students who took the literacy pretest was 28.1 from a possible maximum score of 75. So our children were averaging around 28 of a maximum score. So they were even below half of that, which did not put them in good standing. As I look at the preceding slides, as we look at the preceding slides, we will make some more meaning out of this. Transformation strategy and results. Data revealed that stakeholders were of the view that capacity in literacy needed to be built among them effectively to deliver the program. So they were of the view that they needed capacity. So the pretest was conducted with grade 2 students to ascertain the level of their literacy performance. And after the level of their literacy performance was established, and based upon the data that the stakeholders gave, an 8-point holistic literacy training plan was developed with the input of literacy specialists that was administered to the stakeholders over a 3-day period at the Regency Hotel. So we had them seated comfortably for 3 days so that they could be impacted and an impartation could be made on their lives so that they could be more effective after they would have been released to go back in the school system. Servant leadership and Shalom leadership perspective were brought sharply into focus in this plan. I must say that Some persons, even the principal and the supervising officer, they probably would have heard about servant leadership, but the concept of shalom, and that's what I like about Baki, the uniqueness of these principles, fixing the brokenness and so on and so. I think they were really impacted in the sense that, they recognized that, once they were empowered, the brokenness that existed in the school system could be fixed, and they were eager to be a part of the process. So the parents and everyone, they were eager to be a part of that. After monitoring the implementation of the plan over 8 weeks, a post-test was administered to all the students, 39 of them, grade 2 students, for the purpose of evaluating the impact of the intervention plan on their literacy performance. And these were the results. So I used the t-test was used to evaluate the impact of literacy performance. And if we look at this, we see the results of the t-test illustrated a statistically significant difference in the pre-test. So as against the post-test. The mean there, if we could see it on the screen, is 28.1. The standard deviation was 17.94, as against the post-test where the mean was 4.01 and the standard deviation was 17.39, which suggested, of course, we used the p-value of 0.01, which suggested that the spread around the mean of the children, it was indeed very effective in terms of the results, because the children, they were actually, all of the children, basically, this is saying, all of the children actually did better, far better than how they functioned earlier. So the significant increase post-test score was indicative of the fact that students can and will enhance their performance in literacy when stakeholders are equipped and empowered to deliver the programs. And so I think the results actually show that. And secondly, students are capable of transitioning to higher grades with ease as we launch out and we purposefully determine our hearts to meet those children's needs. Because I must say that I visited the school at the end of the term, and one of the teachers said, "Sir, you really cause us to see the things differently because we know you were watching also. We really work hard," and so on. And so long after these results that we received, those children who are now going into grade 3 understand that their work was significantly higher as they now move on to grade. And this is exactly what we would like to see in all the schools, not just Smith's school. The communication strategy I found helpful. Strategic visioning. I think I found that very important. I think many times we attempt to do things, but we attempt to tell people what to do. And so people do not buy in to the vision because they're not a part of the vision. I think it is so important that we sit down with people and let them be a part of the process. And if there's buy-in and they're part of the process, I think these persons will be more effective. So collectively arriving at a strategy and sharing its details or information in a cogent manner with individuals set aside for a specific task, I think this was most productive, as was evident in the transformation and the literacy performance of our students. Another communication strategy had to do with the deliberate attempt to build healthy relations with stakeholders through meaningful engagement. I think this was most rewarding. So this strategy focused on meeting the needs of stakeholders, such as to belong. People want to belong, to be respected, to feel being a useful part of a process that they could contribute creatively to the accomplishment of a worthwhile objective. And I think this was a very good strategy in my view, to meet the needs of the people. Let them feel that they have something to offer. I think the worst thing we could do is give people the impression that they have nothing to offer. And it was amazing how some of these persons who may not have finished high school and so on, how they were able to contribute to the process. And then I think what I found very useful was the construction of a database consisting of the home addresses, telephone numbers, email addresses, and the like. I think this was important because by having this database, we would have been able to check on the performance of the stakeholders. It made them accessible for information sharing and to monitor them, because we didn't just want to do the intervention and then leave them alone. I think monitoring was important. And so by having that database, we were able to monitor not only at the level of the school, but where they operate even at home and so on. Lessons learned through this project. I've learned so many things as I went through this project. I've learned it all since, this has registered to me in a deeper way that they were created with potential and in the image of God. And I believe when that image is respected and cultivated, regardless of their race, their social status, where they come, socioeconomic background, children will advance, they will develop, they will move on. So that was critical for me. Collaboration and teamwork, I think this is so necessary. Necessary and sufficient ingredients for collective impact. This is Dr. Randy White's, when I was down in Fresno, collective impact and lasting transformation as seen in improved literacy performance. So collaboration, teamwork, togetherness. I think that's the way to go. And Baki University has emphasized this like no other university that I have seen or known. Thirdly, in this project I've learned that people may genuinely want to do well, but lack the know-how and the drive to move forward. However, I think they could perform exceedingly well when they're empowered, when they're encouraged to do well, and they're exposed to the kind of training that is important, that is the kind of training that is necessary, that will cause such an empowerment to take place. I may go on. So another lesson I think that is critical for me is that focusing on your weakness. Sometimes we focus on, I've learned so much from Baki in the sense that, you always wanted to give people the impression that you know, and that you're probably important and you're the main man, and without you, nothing could happen. And that's a culture that we have in our country. And so people sometimes, they take this high position. And I have learned that, that I have weaknesses, and the weaknesses that I have, while those weaknesses might be there and it will tell me how I need to improve, those weaknesses also tell me that I need to find people, align myself with people who could help and who could. So if you spend a whole lot of time looking at how you don't have this capacity to do this, you don't have that, but there are people, and I think great leaders actually learn how to leverage skills and abilities of other people to advance a cause. And so that has been very great for me. I think I'm strong in this area now. Looking for people constantly to empower them, and also persons who could actually join you in it as a team going forward for effectiveness. So simply put, my weaknesses illustrate my need for people, and more importantly, my need for a transcendent God. We are not gods, we are mere men, and therefore we need one another. As we have a calypso in Guyana, it says no man is an island, and so people need people. So I have developed a deep appreciation for this thing called integrity, which is Latin. I think it has to do with wholeness of heart, being whole, integrity, and I've learned that. I borrowed this quotation from a gentleman by the name of Hutson, who said, he classically defines integrity as the concept of consistency of actions. How I've grown, I'm speaking to how I've grown now. Consistency of actions, values, methods, and principles, expectations, and outcome that connotes a deep commitment to the right thing for the right reasons, regardless of the circumstances. And so I think this really ministered to me to be consistent. And because I think it is one Dr. Miles Monroe said, leadership is predictable. You know, when you're unpredictable, people, you know, maybe integrity could be questioned there. Because people will know if this leader does this, or if this leader sees a certain kind of behavior, this is what this leader will say. People know that. And so I think that really speaks to integrity. People know how you will react because they know what you stand for and so on. So I've seen how my actions in this regard would have influenced my followers, those who I have responsibility, who I work with and operate with in the execution of tasks and so on. So I am more patient with persons in terms of how I've grown. I am more patient. My wife is sitting right here, and she's one of the PLCs, and she will tell me from time to time, you know, you've grown. There was a time when people can't meet your standard quickly. You know, you could become agitated and so on. So my thing now is that we need to be coached. We need to be coach people and to counsel them, and not to be abusive or abrasive, but to constantly seek to build people up because they have something to offer. From an organizational perspective, I have developed the capacity to create a heightened awareness of the high level of transformation that may occur within the organization. And I have another PLC here, Ms. Jennifer Combach, who's the director of NSERD, and I'm sure she could attest to this fact that I have started to practice servant leadership, incarnational leadership, shalom leadership. These principles are always coming out in my meetings, and some of them, they have even borrowed those principles. And I think that's what influence is all about, changing the way people think and how they operate. This manifestation is made pronounced, as I said, in the ministries of education effectiveness in addressing the brokenness of our school system. I'm the chairman of what we call the Education Systems Committee with some very senior persons and so on. And I constantly, from the day I started back in these meetings, I started to practice because I believe if you learn things, you have to share and to practice. So I think communities are now impacted by those members who themselves, they have become agents of change through the PTAs or Parent Teachers Association or action committee groups and so on. Some of these persons who supervise schools, they are now speaking the language. As an evangelist in my local church, and I can now strategically apply the principles that one writer described as the manifesto of Jesus, as stated in Luke 4:18, in the delivery of a holistic gospel, in the delivery of work in a holistic fashion. For example, the gospel must include the charismatic, the koinonia, and the diachronic, which is we don't only speak to things, but we empower and we serve. I think service is important in the whole mix and the empowerment. So sometimes we just go and we talk, but we have to empower and we have to serve. And so this has been my approach, even in the school system, in an evangelistic fashion, to speak, to empower, and to serve. Future plans and recommendations. My future plans for the project include writing a book titled Changing the Status Quo in Literacy, a collaborative approach. And I don't know for the end, if you goodly gentlemen may advise me which one sounds better, or achieving better results in literacy, a collaborative approach. I would like to do something like this as a project when I would have completed my studies. Applying the principles embodied in this project to various schools, I believe that now we have the information. We should not, I should not stick to one school, but I, could move from school to school in order of priority, in order of need. Going forward, I plan to mobilize others to rally around this cause through the implementation of similar training programs and seminars as I move to other communities, because I started in one community, but I believe something like this deserves to transcend communities. Another plan is making presentations of the report to government officials one person from the CARICOM community already asked me if I could give them, they would like to have a look at the dissertation, because it is something that may be able to, something that could be applied on a broader basis. So making presentations to reported government officials of my country to garner support for rolling out this project nationally, and presenting reports to organizations if I'm able to, such as UNICEF, UNESCO, with a view of having this project adopted and replicated in other countries. I know I might be thinking a little big, but I think, you know, that's how Jesus people think. Replicated in other countries that may find it useful. Consequent to the results yielded in this project, I'm looking at my recommendations in particular now. I think after piloting the project in a few schools, a policy should be developed, making it mandatory that stakeholders work collaboratively for improved literacy performance of students across schools. We have this dilemma where our children are not performing to the level that they should perform. And I think maybe if we pilot this in a few schools, it might convince persons, look, we need to have a policy or something that says this is where we want to go and this is how we must function. I believe also specified sums of money should be given or could be given to the school system to ensure that something like this, you know, keeps on the front burner. So sums of money could be allocated by those who manage budgets and so on for training of stakeholders in these literacy concepts as advocated by this project. I would want to recommend also that the principal or principal's teacher should hold high expectations of students, because we've seen once this has happened, how it has affected our children positively. Such expectations will encourage them to use the appropriate pedagogy or teaching materials and methodology for maximum impact. I would also recommend that parents, caregivers should endeavor to act in congruence with the school by, you know, providing and sustaining the support for their children, ensuring that they do their homework, that visits are made to the school and so on, finding out how children are performing and what have you. Consistent monitoring. I think we've been failing terribly in this area, because the monitoring and the evaluation of the progress and efficiency in the delivery of the literacy programs in our schools, I think that has been poor, and so we need to be more consistent in how we move forward in that. I think our education supervisors should lead the way in promoting transformational leadership perspectives such as shalom and servant leadership. And the serious consideration should also be given to the use of information technology, because I've seen how children's eyes open up, light up when they're exposed to the technology in the teaching and learning process. And so the conclusion, in my view, is that the problem of school literacy performance in the lower grades, this problem could be resolved in a significant way, if not totally eliminated. I believe that all we need to have is a holistic approach to the teaching of our children in literacy. And we have seen how training in this area among the stakeholders would have impacted positively on their performance. I think that when they are committed, our stakeholders are committed, we will see the impact and we will see the change that we require. So generally, I believe the employment of this model has the potential to address the problem, taking into consideration the improvement we've seen by students in literacy performance, and we saw the statistical significance in their performance. But I believe this is just one school, and therefore I think something like this would need to be piloted in other schools where we could make some definitive decisions going forward. The rest of the slides basically has to do with the reference. I would like to pause here now, Dr. Payne, Dr. Brian, and Dr. Thompson. Hello?
Yeah, okay. I had to unmute my mic. Thank you, Marcel. Yeah, that was very, very helpful. It's very, very, very well done, and I just appreciate the work that you are doing and will continue to do in some of these transformational principles that you're learning and trying to implement within the educational communities where you have some influence. Well, let's take some time now and think about the presentation and some of the thoughts, the concepts. Those of you that were more directly involved, Dr. McCabe, Dr. Thompson, I appreciate you taking a lead in terms of some of the topics that you think would be worthwhile for us to discuss as a group. So I just open up the mic then to whoever would like to talk now.
I will jump in. Marcel, I just want to say congratulations. I am really excited about where your leadership has developed and where your research landed, and just excited to see where this is all going to lead for you. Excellent presentation. I appreciated the slides. Really kind of concisely went through a lot of work that you spent and invested into this document, and it was a good summary. I'm really impressed that, well, first I want to say education and reform is hard. It's challenging. It's true here in the United States. It's true anywhere. And it's a tough thing to take on. I think you could have picked some other topics that would have maybe been a little bit easier. And instead, you went right at the heart of your work, right at the heart of something that really needed to experience some transformation. I'm also impressed that when I first saw your dissertation topic, I was actually really surprised that you just selected one school to do a deep dive on, knowing that you have influence in so many schools throughout the education system there. And so I was really impressed that you just were able to get so much out of one school, and then you can kind of scale it from there. If you pick one of the schools that's struggling the most, then you can really make a significant impact anywhere in that case. And I really appreciate how you engage multiple stakeholders. Oftentimes in education reform, either people blame the teachers, or the teachers blame the parents, or the teachers blame the administrators, or the principal blames the teachers. And you kind of get into this big blame game, and nobody wants to take accountability for the breakdowns. And it's really requires so many people working together to bring about transformation in education systems. And somehow you were able to kind of do that. And you mentioned Shalom leadership and servant leadership as two things that you heavily emphasized. I wrote down incarnational leadership as I was listening to you talk as well, because I feel like that concept probably won't carry over too much to people if you would have talked about incarnational leadership a lot. But your presence there, you said a line that some of the teachers said, well, we knew that you were going to be here, so we knew we had to get this thing turned around. And that's actually a really great example of incarnational leadership, where you spent time in an underperforming school, and you said, I'm going to be here and hold us accountable, and I'm going to do my best to train you and equip you. So I was just thrilled to see where your research went, and I wanted to just also point out that I saw that incarnational leadership emphasis in your research. I think your biblical foundation is particularly strong, and you're somehow you figure out how to incorporate your faith into every part of what you do in kind of this public sector influential position that you have, which is pretty impressive. So my question, though, all that aside, it's not about me talking at you, but my question is, with this concept of shalom leadership and servant leadership and the path forward, you said some people have kind of latched onto it. That's actually kind of unusual, because shalom can be kind of a loaded term in many places. It has a little bit of baggage, and you said yourself that servant leadership isn't necessarily heavily emphasized in a more hierarchical leadership structure that you have there. So can you just tell me, it's more of I just want to hear you share a little bit about the path forward with shalom leadership and servant leadership. How do you see that expanding? How do you see that taking root in your work as you move forward?
Okay. First, if I could deal with servant leadership first. In my cultural context, there is this thing that persons expect to be served rather than to serve. And I think that that has really would have had a negative impact on the school system and even in our society. I think that when people ascend to certain offices, they expect people to serve them rather than serving persons. And I think even as I looked at the literacy training plan, we looked at the tenets of servant leadership. You know, how critical it is, how important it is when you put others first. I mean, it's not an easy thing, all right? But in the context of the children, you're an adult, you're already a teacher, you've already done well academically, but here it is that you're not giving your best to the children. And I think an awakening came about, you know, in that respect as I visited the schools. And like I said, even where I sit as the chairman of the Education Systems Committee, persons are now understanding the importance of serving. I think that I mentioned the whole thing about diachronic, and those are terms that I use to serve. And the people are, I think persons' eyes are now open to the rewards that come from serving. So while you should not expect to be served, but when you do good returns to you, and so that kind of thing that I had that kind of engagement with those under my sphere of influence. Shalom, I really emphasize on the brokenness of the school system. The brokenness, no relationship. I think you know, people broken in terms of not having a relationship with themselves, not even with God. You know, I didn't want to end up preaching to some of these people. They're not Christian, but in a very tactical way. You know, I have to explain, look, if you're broken, if you're broken with yourself, we should recognize that we are here to do God's will, to do God's purpose. And if you can't see that, all your efforts could be in vain. And so lots of emphasis were placed on the importance of fixing the brokenness that we see in the school system. The only way that could have been done is for a focus on God, seeing ourselves as agents of change, and that brokenness could be repaired, and we're not in a die. There are some people who actually tell me, look, we're in a bad state and this is it. But like when I cited the case with Israel, the case with Solomon, how Israel prospered, Israel was transformed, and we saw Israel doing very well because Solomon built relationships. He was concerned about the welfare of people and that kind of thing. So those were some of the conversations that I would have had with those under my sphere of influence. And they were actually using the terms, some of them are actually using the terms.
That's great. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Dr. Thompson or anyone else who wants to ask a question.
I'll ask you a question, Marcel. You've talked about the positives that have happened in this plan, what you've done so far. Did you experience any resistance to what you were trying to do from any of the from any sectors that you were working with?
Not really, and I think one of the reasons why that may not have happened, it was a single school, and we were like a knitted group. And so we learned to appreciate. I don't know if it was a much larger group, if I might have been able to detect. But what I discovered is that persons, they were saying, look, we need this thing, because an awakening took place. We need this thing, because I took the results and I said, look at what these children are doing. Is it that we're suggesting that there are zeros that they can't achieve? You know, is it that they can't become? Can't we do something? And people came to the realization that, you know, what we're seeing here is far beyond the potential of our children. And therefore, I did not detect any resistance.
Good.
If it was there, it might have been covertly done, but most persons, or all the persons admitted. It was amazing how parents came and they brought, some parents they had 2-year-olds, children who were not eligible for school as yet, but they came with those children. In like 4 cases, we had parents who walked with their children because they wanted to be a part of the process. They want to learn going forward. So, in my opinion, Dr. Payne, there was no major resistance, if any resistance at all. And like I said, it was a small group. So we kind of gelled nicely as a team.
Good.
Marcel, another quick question for you. This one's actually for your PLC members. So you referenced your wife is on your PLC and one of your colleagues. I don't know if I think you said that they're present in the room.
Yeah.
You actually, since you brought it up and you kind of put yourself out there and said that they noticed some transformation in your behavior and in your leadership going through this program and doing this project. I'd like to hear just maybe if they could expand on that or what that was like from their perspective. If they're willing to talk, are they able to do that?
There are 3 of them here, and I'm sure they're willing to speak. So,
seeing that, Marcel, good evening all. It's a pleasure being here. Watching this whole process from the beginning to this point. Seeing that he put it out here, that was the first thing that he was going through, the questions and trying to answer. I recognize in terms of personal relationship, being with him all the time. And he mentioned it, he's being more patient. He has learned to become a little more patient with persons. And even at home, because he has a specific way of doing stuff and getting stuff done. And, you know, but since doing this program, since being with Baki, I can see that patience being exhibited more and more. And I would often tell him, you are so different now than before. You know, it's like this sharp fuse. You got to get stuff done and done in a specific way. But now you find this, his ability to just work with persons at their level and at their readiness level, so to speak. Yeah.
let's come back.
Well, Mr. Hutson is my chief education officer. And I have had other chief education officers, so I can compare. And especially since Mr. Hutson, I wouldn't say Marcel, I call him Mr. Hutson.
People call me Marcel.
Since he has done this program, you could have seen the progression. You could have seen it in terms of relationships with his co-workers and his subordinates. You could have seen it in his way of thinking, because I have a certain way of thinking, and then he would tell me, well, I wouldn't do it like that. Look, you know, I know like you, I am going to do X, Y, Z, and you will say Y. And then when in your quiet moments, when you listen, you realize there's the wisdom there. So I've seen him improve in relationships with everybody. I've seen him improve, and this is not because he is here, but persons will talk behind your back, and persons would say, yes, Mr. Hutson is changing. And I think that is testimony. And these are non-Christians who are saying, you see how Mr. Hutson isn't that, as his wife speaks about the short fuse, he is more patient, he listens, and he allows persons to express themselves. And he is showing that he recognizes that there's value, there's worth in everybody. So from the highest to the lowest. And he keeps preaching that action, that we must listen and we must work with others. And even if some persons don't appear to be working so well. You still have to be patient. You still have to listen, because I have people on me, and he would remind me that I have to listen to some of them. They have value, they have worth. So, and even as, to me, all of us went along with him with this program, this doctorate. We went along with him because we grew. We learned a lot of terms, and we learned what we should be doing. We were able to think differently on some aspects. So we actually, all of us grew with him as he did his doctorate. We were involved because he lived it. He spoke it. He didn't just do his stuff in a corner by himself. Every time he spoke, I knew what he was doing, because you could hear the different things that he emphasized. So we all, as a team, worked with him. I mean, even those who were not his PLCs, they knew, and they knew what he was doing and what he was about, and they saw the change, the several changes, even in the way he spoke, even his speeches. He learned so much from. I have said to him that I enjoy listening to his speeches, because you've seen that it's different. It's different from before. It's much improved, and he's living what he has learned. He has really read a lot, and I feel all of that and the different parts, but encouraging, and I've seen that this university is a different kind of university than others that
Dr. Brian, there is also a doctoral candidate in the room. There's a young man that I'm working on. I'm saying to him that he has to do this program, and so he is here today, and I'm sure he wants to say something.
All right.
Reverend Hutson has already said some of what, well, he stole my thunder, so to speak, because I was going to reference that very same point he made. But I want to start off just from where Mr. Cumberbatch ended. I have the distinct honor of being on a panel where we do a television program called Choices that we broadcast to the nation and the rest of the world every week. And Reverend Hutson normally leads off the discussions. And as he did this program, I could have seen a change in his way of thinking. His analyses became a bit crisper. And I've always said to him sometimes, I don't envy you, the fact that you have to open the bowling, so to speak. But I don't know if you guys are familiar with cricket, but he's the opening pitcher if you want to go for the baseball analogy. And he has to set the pace. He has to set the framework for us. But I know it was because of the exposure and the different readings he had to do as he was doing this program. It improved his ability to frame some concepts. Frame them in ways that I would not have even thought of framing them. But they were framed precisely, and they laid the platform for us. So that's one of the major things I saw over the last few years as Reverend has been doing this program. And as he did it, he certainly didn't do it to exalt himself above all others and leave the rest behind. Because as he's mentioned, he's been bugging me and telling me that I should get on board. And I must admit that wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to do. But I watched this gentleman do it. And he's smiling all the time. I don't know if he's fooling me with the smiles. It certainly doesn't look too tough. And he looks like he's having a lot of fun. And I am one who, personally, I like to read as well. I like to spread my horizons in various areas. So I'm seriously considering taking up the challenge very soon. And so I have him to thank more than most for that, because he doesn't let me go, right? He always asks me. A matter of fact, I think just last Sunday, within the last, I think if not this Sunday, the one before, he said, "So when so you ready to start that thing?" I wonder, what is he talking about? And then I realized what he's talking about. So yes, he's changing, he's transforming, but along the way, he's also seeking to transform others.
Wow, that's just what we hope for. So that makes me very happy. Dr. Payne, I think our work is done here.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, we've got another recruiter right there in Marcel. So thanks, Marcel. Yeah, I think Dr. Thompson was muted. Let me unmute you, Dr. Thompson. I don't know if you had anything else you'd like to say.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I must compliment Marcel for one particular aspect of his work, and that is how he has grown after this experience. That part I felt was the most significant part for me, although I worked with him and helped with the other parts, but our student has grown after an experience. This is something I think, and the way that he has put it out is something that is very, very significant. And I do hope somebody asked a question just now about how, if he has any problem of trying to get this over, because he'll have to be working with, in this position, he'll be working with others. And it would be important to know how much resistance, if any, he'll be having in trying to put forward, because the way, the type of person he is, I know he won't have that much problem. But again, I must say that is, I really like that part, because that's something I'm accustomed to seeing in a dissertation, where students actually document how they've grown and what they can do with their work. I think that's all I want to say at this stage.
Amen. It's a real testimony too, I think, just to follow up on what Dr. Thompson said, is it's just there's testimony from your PLC members of changes they've seen in you, Marcel, and that's very commendable, that you are you're humble and you're moldable by the Lord as he shows you areas that he wants to transform in your life, and that's just commendable as you do that. And then as you do that, you're an example to others to
Yes.
take on that same kind of attitude of humility that the Lord says we must have, right? If we're going to be doing his work. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments before we move into an evaluation time? Okay, I think go ahead.
I just want to say real quick, Dr. Payne, to the PLC members, I know firsthand, having gone through a doctoral program at BGU, the sacrifice that a spouse makes, and even the colleagues that you kind of, a doctoral program can cause a lot of stress and strain in the work environment and in interpersonal relationships. So I just wanted to congratulate all of you as well for the investment that you've given up in time and in many other ways you sacrificed, I'm sure, to support Marcel through the program. So I wanted you to know I appreciated the feedback that you just gave. I know I joked about it, but it's actually really special to hear from you how much he's changed and grown through the program. That's why we do what we do. So thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Me too. Say the same thing. All right, with that, I'm going to put you all there at Marcel's house on hold for a few minutes. It'll probably take us about 10 minutes to get through this form. So hold on. Your screen will say something like you're on hold, and I'll bring you back in about 10 or 15 minutes or so. All right. So here we go. Put on hold. All right. All right. I'm going to share my screen. This is this form that we need to fill out with each other. I went ahead and took some notes on this form. So we'll just kind of finish filling it out, I guess, together online. I know the handbook says the supervisor has to fill it out, but I find it just as easy to go ahead and do it online with each other, and then I'll circulate this form to each of us, and we can just give our approval by email. Our registrars are Bridget and Judy, and just your email approval will be your confirmation that you've gone through this oral review and given your stamp of approval. Okay?
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. I'm going to bring Marcel back in. Hold on a second. Oh, here he is. Okay, take off hold. All right, I think everybody's back with us now. Well, Marcel, we want to just tell you congratulations, Dr. Hutson. We've approved you, and you are now going to be a doctor. So congratulations.
Dr. Marcel, congratulations.
Congratulations, Dr. Marcel.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I really appreciate working with you. And you could rest assured that I will not put what I've learned, I will put what I've learned to good use and to promote the cause of Back University, because like I said, there is no other university in terms of the culture and the views like Baki. That's the uniqueness about Baki, and I'm grateful to have been exposed to the university, and more importantly, to be taught by you professors. Thank you very much.
Amen. All right. Well, yeah, congratulations, Marcel. And again, it's been a pleasure working with you. And I think we on the committee, we all agreed that you were very easy to work with and always open to our suggestions. And again, we just are thankful to the Lord of the work we're seeing him do in you as you keep growing, as all of us are as transformational leaders where the Lord has planted us. And just continue to pray that God will give you the wisdom to keep making, keep being responsive, I guess, to the Lord's direction as he leads you on how to present this content in various places and schools where the Lord might lead that to happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Brian.
Yeah, my encouragements to you, congratulations. And this is just the beginning. So you can take a little bit of time to breathe this out a little bit and rest and re-engage with your close relationships. But then my encouragement to you is just keep, this is a baseline for you to do tremendous work for the rest of your career and make a huge difference with your life and your leadership. So I'm going to be tracking, hopefully, to see where all this leads for you. I'm excited for you.
Thank you, Dr. Brian.
I must say I concur.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson.
All right. Well, you all can go and celebrate now. You can have a party there, I guess, at the house. Yeah. And...
We have our water.
All right. Good for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I opened our session in prayer. Would some be willing to kind of ask the blessing of the Lord on Marcel and his work?
I'll do the prayer.
Thank you.
Oh, Father, we just return praise and thanks. We thank you, Lord God, for, first of all, our brother, Reverend Hutson, Reverend Dr. Marcel Hutson. Lord, it is with great pleasure that we witness our brother successfully completing this work. We thank you, Lord God, for being with him throughout this entire process. Thank you, wife, son, and all of his friends and relatives who stood by him, all those who supported him. We thank you, Lord God, for their faithfulness. And even as he achieved this milestone, as his tutors just said, this is not the end, but it is actually the beginning. You have brought us onto this earth with a purpose. And Dr. Hutson will fulfill his purpose. He is walking in purpose. Help him to be that transformational leader that will impact, firstly, Diana, but not only stop there, but go on to impact the world. Thank you for the fact that he has yielded himself to be used by you. And we ask you to continue to protect him, strengthen him, let him increase in wisdom. Let him continue to be a good ambassador for you, that all the world may be able to see and know you and understand that you are indeed the one and only true God, our Savior. We thank you even now for the testimony that his life is and will continue to be. Even as we prepare to leave here, we ask that you be with us all. Thank you for your faithfulness, Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
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 All right.
Amen.
Well, thank you. So good. It's just been a good time to hear what's happening and sharing our thoughts. And so may the Lord just continue to watch over us and give us direction. And again, Marcel, you'll be graduating in June. You can be in contact with either Dr. Judy or Dr. Bridget there at the registrar's office and just email. Probably Judy would be the person right now. I think she's going to be finishing her term of service. Actually today or tomorrow, but you could go ahead and email both of them, I think, and they will lead you through the final process of getting your dissertation bound and everything else. Okay?
Thank you. I hope to see you in Dallas on the 1st of June, the Lord willing, Dr. Payne. I don't know, Dr.
Right.
Brian, will you be there?
I will be there. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
See you then.
All right.
All right. I can't wait.
All right. Congratulations, and let's we'll go ahead and sign off now.
All right.
Bye-bye.